It Follows is a supernatural horror movie directed in 2014 by David Robert Mitchell. It involves a young woman who gets banged by her new boyfriend, and after they do the act, he starts talking crazy, saying that he's passed something on to her. Something is going to start following her, and for her to get rid of it, she has to copulate with somebody else. So this curse or this entity gets passed on to them. And for them to survive, they'll have to pass it on to somebody else, and so on and so forth. Now this entity takes the form of a human being. It could be a stranger, it could be someone the cursed person knows. And all it does is walk directly towards the person it's after. That's all it does. And it's up to the cursed person to stay far away as possible, and eventually pass this disease or whatever it is on to another person. It is a scary movie. Most of the horror, in my opinion, lies in the very idea itself, the fact that somewhere in the world this thing is walking towards you without deviation. What is it going to do when it gets you? Well, you don't want to wait to find out. And what even is it? We never find out. It's a very simple but intelligent and enigmatic premise. And because this thing doesn't rest, it doesn't stop, it's always trying to get you no matter where you are throughout the world. The director mentioned that it would even board a plane just to get to you. The film has an unrelenting, impending sense of doom. The second most effective source of the scares is the execution. You have to also look at what is providing the actual scares themselves. Like Hitchcock quite cleverly used everyday things in some of his horror films, like the famous shower curtain scene in Psycho, or just simply seeing a flock of birds might remind you of the movie The Birds. John Carpenter did something else similar in the original Halloween movie, with Michael Myers standing stationary in a distance, just far enough that you can't really make out who it is or what he's looking at, or whether he's actually looking at you, but close enough to make it really creepy. And many movies that have, say, the baddie appearing from behind a mirror scaring the protagonist. These scares are generated from everyday stuff, aren't they? This means in our day-to-day lives, we can be affected by these films. A lot of people naturally wouldn't close their shower curtains after watching Psycho for a couple of days. Or perhaps when they just see a flock of birds on a bridge or something, it instantly reminds them of the horror movie directed by Alfred Hitchcock. And even within the film itself, because the scares here are being generated by someone simply walking towards the main character. And because of this, the tension barely ever lets up, because as stated, this thing doesn't take a rest. So it's always walking, not running, very rarely showing any kind of emotion. And oddly, because it's so normal, that's what makes it so scary. Especially seeing as though the stalker, whatever it is, could appear at any given moment in the film, which it does. Say if you are affected by this curse, and you do manage to get rid of it by giving it to someone else, and you ensure or you find out that they've given it to someone else, who's given it to someone else, who's given it to someone else, and the chain has gone quite far down the line, even then, the character can't be reassured because, of course, for all he knows, a couple of weeks down the line, months, maybe even years, the very latest person might get bumped off by the thing, which means it comes back to the next person before, and eventually it will come all the way back to that character. There's a real sense of unease, and long after the credits are finished, you fear for the lives of the characters involved in the movie. After the main character becomes aware of this thing, her and her young adult friends might be casually talking, mildly looking out for anyone suspicious, but the stalker wouldn't be doing anything suspicious. And what with the film being shot with a wide-angle lens, the stalker could appear in the corner of the frame. We'd see it, and we'd be internally screaming at the characters to move, to turn around, it's behind you, and they'll just be doing their thing, and it really gets you going, gets your heart thumping. If you want to see the stalker as a metaphor for something like STDs, or the dangers of casual sex, or something similar, it doesn't hurt to, but I like the fact that the message or metaphor present, if there is one, is not front and center. The original Halloween, for example, even though it wasn't the intention of the filmmakers, can be seen as a celebration of chastity. But that metaphor is not integral to the film, and therefore you can enjoy the movie without acknowledging that specific metaphor or accepting it. Whereas a film like The Babadook, for example, that particular film fails in this department. It's almost impossible to get the most out of the movie without seeing the Babadook creature as some kind of metaphor for something, like the main character's grief over her dead husband or something along those lines. If the Babadook is accepted as something which is literal, a real, actual monster, the film is kind of meh in this way. Its impact comes through the metaphor, so you're forced to accept it. I've always thought that a really good movie should work on two levels. One being, the general stuff, how it looks, how it sounds, whether it's entertaining, and the other being the subtext, the message behind the film. And if the two remain separate, then that means pretty much anybody can enjoy the movie. You don't have to be a film freak analysing every single second of the movie, and likewise you don't have to be just a casual moviegoer wanting to kill some time on a Saturday afternoon. Both parties are able to enjoy this kind of movie. It Follows works on both levels. It's a straight up self-contained entertaining horror movie, and it is also a metaphor for whatever you want it to be, really. Even though a lot of it is irritatingly mumbled, the dialogue between the teenagers, or young adults, whatever they are, it feels natural, and the acting all round is decent. Sure, they do some stupid things, but they do act as you'd expect people of their age to do so in this crazy situation that they're in. But there was one specific part that I just couldn't get my head around. So the main character obviously knows this thing is after her, and she agrees to bone one of her mates. She tells him, he's aware, he doesn't quite believe it, but she obviously knows. And after it's done, she somewhat is reassured. But why is she reassured? She knows it's going to come for him, even if he himself doesn't believe it. And then eventually, after a couple of days, it catches up with them and it kills him off. And then she's shocked, she's surprised. But why are you surprised? You knew that was going to happen. I could not understand the reasoning behind that. From his side, yeah, because he didn't believe it, and he obviously saw it as an opportunity to reassure her and obviously a chance to bang someone. But I just don't understand her reasoning. There's loads of really scary scenes in this movie, and most of them just involve someone walking calmly towards someone else while the latter is shitting their pants. And it's actually quite funny, a lot of the parts, if you take them out of context. I mean, can you imagine someone walking in while you're watching this movie, and a group of people are screaming, ranting, raving, running away from an old harmless looking lady walking calmly towards them, or something like that, or a naked guy with a poker face on your roof? There was one part that I actually cracked up on, which was where the main character is in a shed or something, and she's shooting at the stalker coming towards her. Now, only the person who is cursed or has been cursed in the past can see this thing. She's shooting at the stalker, and someone comes up behind the stalker, and he dives to the nearest chair, and he's begging her to stop shooting, and she's just firing away at the stalker, not even noticing the guy in the background. And that scene cracked me up so much, because when you think about it from his point of view, being her friend, he must have been thinking, what the hell is going on? I mean, I'm sure that scene wasn't meant to be funny, and it's one of the few scenes that actually is. But don't let that take away from the fact that this is a very terrifying movie. It does stay with you. It gets under your skin and on your nerves. And after it had finished, I did feel the urge to go and watch some comedy or watch something happy. I put on a Laurel and Hardy movie, and I haven't done anything like that after a horror movie in a long time. It shows just how effective this film actually was. I looked over my shoulder a couple of times before going to bed or coming out of the bathroom. Very effective it was. The music was nice also. Someone's clearly been watching John Carpenter and George A. Romero's movies, what with the use of synthesizers. And it's not just the music either. It Follows has a lot of homages and references to 80s and 70s horror movies, but it doesn't go too far in that it starts ripping them off, or just comes off as a jumbled collection of memorable stolen scenes from those movies. The homages work within this film, and they work as references to the older movies. Loads of things like, the widescreen, panoramic shots, this suburban landscape, the school as mentioned obviously, and loads of individual scenes. I think 80s horror film fans will definitely enjoy this movie. A sequel might be interesting if it's done right, but it runs the risk of ruining this creepy entity created by Mitchell. I mean, I want to know the backstory of this thing and where it comes from, but at the same time I don't, obviously, because that would ruin it. A significant portion of the horror comes from the fact that we know so little about this thing. It was a scary movie, and not the kind of fun scary, like say, I don't know, Christine or The Evil Dead. It was a kind of genuine unease and grim kind of horror. A very fine film, and I'm happy that its direct-to-video release was pulled and it actually got a chance to get a run in theatres. I think give it a few years, this will go down as a kind of modern day minor horror classic. A 7 out of 10 it gets for me.